Hey guys, last time that we were talking about stuff, we talked about the Third Crusade, kind of the setup for it, and we talked about stuff last time. We talked about how the Crusaders were defeated at the Battle of Hattin, and then Saladin marched on Jerusalem, took that over, and then he came down here to the south and was taking over all the southern cities, and eventually Saladin forces made their way to Tyre, where they were pushed back by Conrad of Montfreat, who then pushed on to Acker and tried to retake that from Saladin. So right now where we're at is that Acker is being defended by Saladin. He has some troops inside the city, and he also has some troops outside the city, while Conrad of Montfreat and Guy Louisiane were both trying to take over the city of Acker. Remember that Conrad of Montfreat was married to the former king's youngest sister, while Guy Louisiane was married to the former king's oldest sister. Okay, so that's where we're currently at in our story. So let's go ahead and talk about now our characters that we have in this story. So let's go ahead and we're going to make a bullet and we're going to write down Third Crusade leaders. So make a bullet and write down Third Crusade leaders. We're going to have 3 Crusade leaders this time. And like the Second Crusade, this crusade is going to be led by kings and emperors, all right? So once again, we're going to have another crusade led by kings and emperors, like in the Second Crusade. The First Crusade was led by, counts, dukes, and barons, but this time it's going to be led by kings and emperors again. The first one of our leaders to talk about is Frederick Barbarossa, the Holy Roman Emperor. So go ahead and make a 1, write down Frederick Barbarossa, Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. So we got 1, Frederick Barbarossa, Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. So Frederick Barbarossa, he's the Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. And of these 3 people, he's going to bring the largest military force of these 3 leaders. After you have number 1 all set, then make a 2 and write down Richard I, the Lionheart, King of England. So number 2, Richard I, Lionheart, King of England. So the King of England, he's going to have the second biggest force, although it's pretty close in terms of size with Philip Augustus, who we'll talk about here in a sec. But Richard I, he's the King of England, and I'll talk about him in a sec. And you can go ahead and write down number 3 as well, and I'm going to talk about some stuff before I move the slide. So make a 3 and then write down Philip Augustus, King of France. So we're going to start off our talk with Richard I and Philip Augustus. So Richard I, his father is the King of England. And what ends up happening is that his father, after the passing of his wife, took on a new wife, who was the Duchess of Aquitaine. Aquitaine was in the Kingdom of France. And what ends up happening is that Richard's father had his oldest son, whose name was Henry, not Richard, had his oldest son, Henry, try to defeat Richard in France. However, Richard ends up defeating Henry in battle, meaning that now Richard, he killed Henry. So now Richard is the oldest son of the King of England. And what ends up happening there is that Richard then combines forces with Philip Augustus, the King of France. The 2 of them defeat Richard's father together, and then they get Richard's father to officially recognize that Richard was the heir of the Kingdom of England. And then Richard's father dies like 2 days later. So Richard is King of England now. Okay, so he wasn't supposed to be, but after Henry died, and then after his father died, now he's the person in charge. So what ends up happening is, you see this blue area right here? That's the territory of Richard's mother. Okay, so this is Richard's mother territory. And when they have their son, Richard, since he's in control of this territory here, when his father dies, he gains all of the English territory as well. So he gains the territory that he had control of here through his mother, and he also gained this territory here through his father. So England is actually all of this territory here. So it's most of France at this time period. So you can see how England controls quite a huge amount of territory at this time period. And then Philip Augustus' territory is right over here on the side. So that'd be Philip Augustus' territory. Philip Augustus became king at 15 in the year 1180 in France. The time that we're talking about right now is 1189. So at this point in time, he's about 24. All right, so let's talk about Frederick Barbarossa now. Frederick Barbarossa is going to leave first of those three leaders. So of those three leaders, Frederick Barbarossa is going to leave first. He has the biggest military force of the three. He's going to have 15,000 troops, another 3,000 knights. However, he is pretty old. He's 67 years old. So he is pretty old. And for the other two people, Richard's going to bring about 8,000 troops with them, and Philip Augustus is going to bring about 7,000. So both Richard and Philip together have about 15,000 altogether, while Frederick Barbarossa has about 18,000 together. So in terms of numbers, this crusade is bigger than our first crusade. So in terms of pure numbers, this crusade has more troops in it than the first crusade. And on this map here, it just simply shows the routes that our three leaders are going to take to get over to the Holy Land. In yellow is the Holy Roman Emperor, Frederick Barbarossa. In red is Richard the First. And then in blue is Philip Augustus. All right, so you kind of see how their paths are making their way over to Acker. So that's where they're trying to all go. They're trying to all go towards Acker. Go ahead and make a bullet and write down the Third Crusade. So make a bullet and write down the Third Crusade. So let me talk about first what ends up happening with Frederick Barbarossa. So Frederick Barbarossa, he's on the way. He's heading down towards Acker, and he's traveling by land. And while traveling by land, the Byzantine Empire tries to slow him down because the Byzantine Empire had made a deal with Saladin that they were going to try to slow down Frederick Barbarossa a bit. It doesn't work very well because Frederick Barbarossa has a very well-organized army, so he just kind of slaps the Byzantines aside. Eventually, Frederick Barbarossa gets into Turkey. He gets in a battle with the Turks. He does pretty well, wins the battle. So things are going pretty well for Frederick Barbarossa. He hasn't any problems, really. With the Byzantine Empire, just kind of slapped them aside. Kind of defeated some Turks over in the Turkey area, kind of slapped them aside. So things have been going well for him. And he wanted to swim in a river one day. So one day, Frederick Barbarossa, there's a river. He's like, oh, I want to go swimming. And he's swimming in a river. Unfortunately, while swimming in a river, Frederick Barbarossa has a heart attack, and then he drowns. And when he drowns, most of his troops decide, well, I mean, the emperor's dead, let's go home. So 75% of his army goes back home, and only 25% of them go on to Acker, which means that a little over 4,000 of his troops are going to head on down to Acker, and the rest of his army is going to go back home. Go ahead and make a number 1, if you would, please. We're going to write down Frederick, drowned on the way. So for 1, Frederick, drowned on the way. So Frederick, as said, he ends up drowning after taking a swim in the river, has a heart attack. And then only 4,000 of his troops go on. The troops are led then by his son. So his son's going to take over the leadership of the remaining troops. All right, well, with his death, let's talk about the other folks there. So the other folks here, we got both in red and in blue. They're both heading over to Acker. Okay, so we got these two groups both heading over to Acker. All right. And we talked about this before as well, but you had both Guy, who was king because he was married to the oldest daughter, so he was king consort because he was married to the oldest daughter of the kingdom of Jerusalem, oldest sister of the former king of Jerusalem. So Guy was the king. However, Conrad and Montferrat, since he was married to the younger sister, there was debate about who was actually king. And in case, both Conrad and Guy were attacking the city of Acker. So they're both sieging the city. So go ahead and make a 2, and we're going to write down siege of Acker, or Acker. So 2, siege of Acker. So both of them are trying to assault the city. They have about 10,000 troops or so-ish that are outside the city of Acker. And eventually, as we said before, there's another 4,000 that would join them from the Holy Roman Empire. It would have been more, but Frederick Barbarossa kind of drowned it. A siege of Acker is going to go on for a long time. It's going to go on from the year 1189 to 1191. So for 2 years, you're going to have armies kind of fighting over the city.